before like we start discussing about like how to contribute to Angular, right? So what is Angular? Well, let's talk about the basics, right? I mean, how to start contributing. Like we want to know like how you started.
Yeah, I just looked up my first PR that I opened on the Angular repo. It got denied. It was ultimately denied. But there's a great conversation on there from multiple members of the Angular team.
So this is like open question for everyone. Most of the people I speak to, they are like struggling with like how to find the good first issue. Like, what's your take, Matthew? Like, why someone should contribute to an open source project? Let it be anything, right? I mean, not specific to Angular, but yeah, any project.
Somebody from the Angular team looks at your code and says, okay, this is good. This is good enough for us, right?
And the Angular code base is just an awesome code base to read, right? Like if you want to learn how to build software, right? Like regardless of what your opinion on Angular as a framework is, like the code base itself is like, it's really good.
For developers looking to contribute, what advice would you give them now you have been contributing for over 1 year?
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of This is Tech Talks, and this is episode 8. And we are really excited today to have Matt with us. I mean, I have been, I'm sure like we are all from Angular community, and you might have been following his work for a long time now. So thanks, Matthew, for joining. I mean, we call Matthew Matt. So I I I remember like meeting him for the first time, and I was like, "What's your name?" because I saw Matthew, Matt, and like, what's your real name? So yeah, but thanks again, Matt, for joining. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Having a great day. I'm happy to be with you guys today.
Thank you. So and we have our co-host Jay, Lars, and Sonu. Sonu is joining for the first time, so he recently joined us as a co-host. And how are you doing, Jay, Lars? And then we'll introduce Sonu for sure.
I'm great. Other than the fact that it's a Monday, my day has just started. I'm assuming all of you. I think it's the end of all of your days, right? Because no, Sanu, where are you, Sanu?
I'm in Toronto, Canada.
Oh, okay. I'm in BC, so I'm like 3 hours behind you or 4 hours behind you.
Yeah. Halfway through. I'm halfway through.
Yeah.
Well, cool. 7 p.m. with me and Santosh.
Yeah.
And I still like have coffee to be here, so it was very tiring day today.
Hey, I drink coffee all day. It's fine. I'll drink a coffee at nighttime sometimes.
Oh, I cannot. I mean, now I have to like stay awake till 1 or 2 p.m. 2 a.m. Sorry. Let's see. Cool. How about you, Lars? What's going on?
Just had dinner. That's why I was a few minutes late.
Nice.
Everything's good. But yeah, welcome, Sonu. Thank you for joining the panel. You are also part of the This is Learning contributors. So welcome to This is Tech Talks.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
I can introduce Sonu. So Sonu, I mean, so the people who don't know Sonu, I mean, we know each other since we used to contribute to Angular. So, and then Sonu was for a long time was a good contributor for Angular. Then he, of course, life happens, and he was away for some time, and then he reached out and he said like, I want to be co-host. I was like, what? let's have you on the show. So yeah, excited to have you, Sonu. I mean, just before we start, like, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm super excited to be here. Like Santosh said, I've been in the Angular community for a long time, I guess. Initially started with contributing, and I've been working with Angular for a long time, since it came out of beta, basically. And I have been spoken to Santosh, many times about contributing, writing articles, doing like podcast hosts, but like I said, life came between. So I finally did it. I jumped the gun, or I don't know what the expression is, but yeah, I finally made it. So I'm excited to be here. I hope this is the first of many.
We do too.
Okay, so let's go back to Matt. So Matt, first of all, thanks a lot for accepting the invite, and we are really excited to like discuss about Angular and of course like how to contribute to Angular. But before we do that, like, can you introduce yourself?
So yes, like you said just before, I'm Matt. A lot of people know me more by my nickname, Jean Meche. It's French. I come from France. I live in Grenoble. It's right in the heart of the Alps. And I'm a software engineer for over 10 years now. And probably a bit like every one of you, I started doing web apps over 10 years ago, started Angular with Angular.js, and then Angular a few years after. Been using now for almost 10 years and started contributing to Angular. It was 1.5 years ago.
Great. So before like we start discussing about like how to contribute to Angular, right? So what is Angular?
What is the Angular? So Angular is a web framework. Uh, Firstly, to aim it was to build what we call single page applications. So applications in JavaScript, or more in the case of Angular in TypeScript, that run directly into the browser. So like a lot of similar technologies, we can give other examples like React, Vue.js, etc. Those are frameworks that helps you build single apps applications. And Angular was created before there was a first version called Angular.js that's way different from what Angular is today. And we had a version 2 that was totally rewritten in TypeScript and totally, let's say, different from the Angular.js, and is mainly developed by a team at Google. I don't know what much can I say about it. It's a great framework. I love to use it. I mean, probably all of you also love to use it.
I think most of us do, yeah.
That's what pays the bill.
Yeah.
So,
exactly. I've been using Angular for Angular.js and Angular for 8 years, and I actually thought you were part of the Angular team, Matthieu, because you're always responding to my doc, my pull requests.
Same.
so somehow we can consider that I'm part of the team. So I'm an open source contributor. I'm not related to Google in any ways, besides using Google like everybody does. And my contribution got noticed actually by the team around a year ago, and they asked me at the beginning, why was I contributing? What was my goal? Who the hell am I? Why do they see so much, let's say, pull requests from me and etc.? And it led me to actually join the team, but as an outsider, not as a Googler. So yes, I'm somehow part of the team. It's not a full-time job for me. It's mostly when I've got so slow days at work. Oh, mostly for me, it's the fun I have after work, let's say.
So if I'm not wrong, Matthew, that's like Angular Angular contributors program. That's what they call it.
Yes, you could call it that. Probably you could say more already part of the team, because I do all the no, maybe not all the meetings, but I get invited some of the meetings with the team. It's around what's the design of the app, of the new features. We do some design reviews. We discuss a lot, etc. So yeah, you could call it a collaborator, contributor, whatever. The title doesn't care much to me. It's mostly the fun of sharing this experience with everybody who's contributing to it.
I think I remember like Sonu used to do the same, because he was also part of the collaborator program, and we had some chats, and he was like, yeah, I get to like get into all the meetings they do and discuss about like what they are planning. So yeah, I think it sounds similar, right? Right, Sonu? This is
it's actually a great program. I find you get to see their design documents, which I find quite impressive, right? So
it's really
the documents that they create, you cannot find it outside and anywhere. Like I haven't seen those yet. So and the knowledge they share, and the chance that you have to be there, that you can be there and talk to them, discuss with them about any upcoming Angular features. It's just like, it's amazing. It's very good knowledge sharing.
I'm assuming, Santosh, you and I have probably seen some of those being GDEs, I would think. I remember we saw some of them when we were doing the pre-defer and control flow and stuff like that. We had some we were invited to some internal meetings, which was really cool to see, because like the level of documentation and like thought that's gone into all this kind of stuff is just like crazy.
And it really helps, because all these documents are stored. And for example, it happens that sometimes someone pops up some kind of archive, let's say document that's 5-6 years old, that allows us to have some kind of insights. So why some features were implemented in one of another way. So it helps to see why things were done, and maybe if we can revisit how the things were done a few years ago, and let's say use maybe new up-to-date technologies. I can give a good example around this, because I've been suggesting recently to move the implementation of all the internationalization, INTN, if you prefer, of the app. We have to call a function with statically import files to do all the localization in apps. And we could rely today on the browser API that weren't this mature a few years back. So seeing the old documents helps understanding what was done, why it was done, and how we can revisit things today. So like you said, great insights. And it's really cool to be able to share this.
Interesting. So, just to like for our you like listeners or watchers who are watching the show. So, is this design doc which you are mentioning, is it publicly available? Let's say after the feature is implemented, like, or is it like only internal to?
Most of the documents are not public, but I'd say the most important is actually the result, and the result is the code you see in the code base. So the code base is quite heavily documented, so you can understand, I would not say quite easily, but you can have an understanding of how things were implemented. And that's what kind of matters to the people that use the framework itself, because first, when you want to know the features, you go to the docs, and sometimes you need to understand some of the internals. You want to be a bit more, have more knowledge of how things work, and you can go directly into the code base itself and have a look at it. We have some internal markdown small docs that help, let's say, introduce the topics we have in the code base. But the design documents, they remain private, but they are mostly not interesting for people who do not do the design, let's say. It's mostly really oriented for the design ahead of landing the final implementation. And what really matters for the dev to me is the implementation in the end.
Interesting. So, what do you think, Jay, Lars, and so on? Do you think that those design doc can be useful for people outside the frame, like outside coding?
I actually asked that. I asked the Google team, if we could release some of those documents, because we're really good and they could help the community, even like companies, to write proper documents, right?
I think sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. It's not that, that it's not only, the document not only discusses, how things should be done, but I have seen documents that also talks about things they have considered on how features could be implemented, but they did not go that route because of, certain reasons. And those are really important. I mean, you see the positive side, right? Like, why was something done? But then you also see the other side of, we could have done it this way, but we didn't do it, and this is why, right?
The alternative they considered, but discarded for whatever reason, like you said.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a catch-22, because like all of us have seen how, let's say, opinionated people on the internet are about certain decisions that a very, very good and intelligent engineering team has made, right? Like, the engineering team behind Angular is objectively awesome, right? Like, I think we can all agree on that, right?
Yeah.
So releasing those documents isn't just about, is it right or wrong technically, right? Would it be helpful to someone that wants to write their own or learn how? It's not just about that. They have to weigh the pros and cons of like, what's going to happen in the, let's say the social circles when they release those, right? Like what kind of blowback are they going to get, or what opinions are people going to misread them, right? Misunderstand an argument for why they didn't implement something one way, and then suddenly there's this whole argument going on online, and they're like, whoa, that's not what we meant by that, kind of thing, right? So more information, I think, is obviously good. I think we can all agree that like the more information everybody has, the better. But they do have to weigh the possible cons of releasing them to the public when the public, and this is a very general statement, but it's very reactionary to certain opinions and decisions that might have been made, right? We've seen that so many times.
Yeah, and I could add on this, when the team want to share something, because they are looking, when they share something, they are looking for some feedback. And for example, we've had a lot of RFCs around signals, around the new syntax, and those are happily written and shared because a community feedback matters somehow a lot, I would say. We can see that it had an impact. For example, on the new syntax, we went with the community suggestion, for example, with the ad block. So, like you said, it's probably not really worth to share this document, but when there is something that needs to be shared, it is, and it's probably mostly for the feedback that the community can provide.
And I think the team has shown that they're open to doing that, right? Like with the numerous RFCs. We've gotten way more RFCs in the past year and a half than like we ever got before, right? With these like major framework changes. So it's not like they're just like, secret meetings in the basement of Google scheming about what they're going to do to Angular next, and then we don't know, right? Like they are giving us a lot of information. And I think there's just some stuff that doesn't necessarily need to be made public.
And I could add that, for example, every feature does land via a PR that is reviewed by some of the teams. So the features aren't hidden before they are actually released. If people really want to follow how things are implemented, they can still provide some feedback on the PR themselves also. So it's not hidden. The code is discussed with the team, with the people that give their feedback on the PRs. So there's a lot of input possible, even without, let's say, starting to contribute code to the code base itself.
And those PRs usually have very lengthy descriptions in them too, right? Like
exactly.
if you want to go see the reasoning, just go look up the PR and read the pull request description, right?
And it has also a let's say, it helps somehow the self-documenting of the code, because, for example, when I look at some files, you want to see when it was introduced. You say, it depends on this commit, depends on that PR. So you check the PR, you get some of the description. You say, oh yeah, I understand why this was landed. Was it a bug fix? Was it a new feature? Was it just refactoring, etc.? So it helps to just gather the information that led to the code we are actually reading at the time.
Okay, I have to comment on this because I'm in the other camp. There's no right or wrong in open source, but there are spectrums of open and closed.
Yeah,
I think Angular has been, especially historically, more of an open source as in free software from Google. And you are right, it has gone towards the other end of the spectrum with these RFCs. However, there's not RFCs for everything. I have stumbled upon these documents before, and apparently I'm not supposed to, but the URLs are public. So if you get the URL, then you can read them. At least the ones I've seen on Google Docs and HackMD, and they were really, really interesting. But maybe I'm one of the outliers that find them interesting. I don't know, because many of them never resulted in anything. So that's the other side of it. It might be too early in point in time to get feedback from the broad community. I guess that's part of the reasoning. And also, when I see these documents, it's really a lot about the internals and considerations that I would not really be able to take into account, since I'm not the framework author. On the other hand, the community are the ones building the applications. I mean, there's certainly a lot of teams within Google, but they are also usually more streamlined in the ways of Google's engineering culture, whereas the community has many different companies and teams and countries developing Angular applications for years and years. So the more open, I think, the better. But it comes with some trade-offs. And these RFCs you mentioned that are public on GitHub discussion, for example, they are. I think the downside is that they are very late in the process. So before it's a public RFC, there's been internal RFCs, whatever you call them, design documents, internal review by the Angular team, of course, internal review by Angular development teams building applications, internal review by Angular GDEs, internal review by Angular collaborators. So the discussion has quieted down quite a bit once it reaches that public stage of RFCs. And that's missing out on lots of good discussion. I mean, there will always be the bad discussion as well when it's in public, but many things have already been discussed a lot behind the scenes in the scheming parts of the internet, as you said, Jay. So the more we can move towards this early feedback from the broader community, I think that's positive. I love the RFCs. I would say most of them, I'm quite happy with where they were already at once they were made public. I didn't have much else to add. I have added to some of them, certainly. But I've been very happy with the recent development in the past few years of Angular itself. But yeah, that's my point of view.
I think the one saving grace there, I definitely don't disagree with you at all, Lars. Like, obviously, I agree, more information the better. But I think the one saving grace is that even though they're late in the process, they've proven that it's not too late to make changes. Right?
Yes.
Like, for amazing, perfect example is the control flow, right? They had it pretty much built at that point, right? Like, they knew what was going, they knew how it was going to work. They designed it, all that kind of stuff. And then the community was like, I don't know, maybe use that instead of that. And they're like, oh, okay, sounds good. Yeah, let's change it up then, kind of thing, right? So
it's probably because it was so major that they just want to make sure that the community was also ready for it. And we saw that the global feedback was, whoa, it's amazing, but maybe we could improve this point. This is actually what happens.
Yeah. So.
And just to come back to what you said, Lars, while I agree, there's also before sharing topic, I think the team likes to just have its mind having discussed all the topic to understand what it's asking to the community, how well it would work, what they would propose. So this is why it doesn't go that early into the process to getting to the community, because most of the feedback was probably not that interesting. And when they are looking for feedback, they have to understand everything beforehand, I'd say. So I can understand from public point of view that people would want to know as early as possible, but probably the design needs to be done partially ahead to have something constructive to share to the community.
I think it's that classic senior engineer thing where it depends. Right. Every case is going to be slightly different. Like, I don't think you can make a hard and fast rule where it's like everything always gets released or nothing ever gets released. Right. It's like situationally, some things will, some things won't. It's just going to depend, because it's not, as much as we might think it is, it's not as easy as just like opening the public up to the document, or opening the document up to the public and just being like, yep, you can all read it now and let's just keep moving on with our day. Right. It's not quite that easy, right? Just providing everybody all these documents with no context. So it's all about resources too.
And there's a part of work also, because we have to know that Angular is Angular is a Google framework that Google uses heavily. Google, I think, uses several thousand of apps. Several thousand of apps use Angular. So there is an implication in this, and sometimes there is information that can't be shared directly with people outside of the closed contributor community, let's say.
Yeah.
There's also something, and it needs extra work sometimes to just say this document can be shared if those items are, for example, removed. It makes the process more complicated for the team. And you know that if something gets more complicated, it takes more time. So it takes more time to just learn the features themselves. So they have to find some kind of balance to be able to get to share the things with the community, get some feedbacks, but also move on the features. Because if it takes 2 years to learn something, then it's way too long.
Great conversation around RFCs. Of course, this is one way to contribute. Like it's in case like you've seen an engineer somewhere working on Angular, probably you can be part of RFCs, which Angular team keeps coming up with. Let's talk about the basics, right? I mean, how to start contributing. Like we want to know like how you started.
So how I started. This is going to be part of the talk I'm going to do at NGConf in 10 days. So first, I could present how I started to contribute. For me, so I've been using Angular for 6-7 years, maybe a bit more. So I'm kind of an expert, I could say. And it was slow day of work. I had already downloaded the repo on my computer, so I was just going through the source code. Some of the things I could only understand. I just stumbled upon a small change that I could do, and I don't know why. I just was like, oh, maybe I could do that change. So I did a change, opened a PR, and somehow it started like that. In my case, I just changed a selector on a directive. So send a PR, had a few feedbacks. I think it was on the commit message, for example, and it was merged 4 or 5 days later, for example. And just small change like that, having the repo on my computer, led me to just become a first-time contributor on Angular.
Sounds very similar to my journey for sure.
So that's mostly what would happen. Just look at it. You can do some changes, but there's so much different ways to start contributing. So if I could do some suggestion, the low-level ones. If you want to contribute to a library, a framework, something, just look at the issues. Or even better, just start opening issues for bugs you might see. For example, having a bug, giving a feedback to the team. Let's say, oh, I believe this is not a feature, it's a bug. Opening an issue on GitHub, providing a StackBlitz repro, and a short explanation why you think it's an issue. That's the first kind of contribution that everybody can do. Even junior finds a bug, thinks can give some feedback, provide a reproduction, boom. You can consider yourself somehow a contributor. Giving feedback is already contributing. You're not contributing code, but you're giving something that the team is looking for, feedback that helps them improve the framework. So you can start like that. But second way is to contribute, I'd say, look at other people issue, look at something new you can do. And in the case of the Angular repo, we've got 2 tags, I think. One is good first issue, and the other one is help wanted. So we tag some issue with these 2 labels, and it helps users find easy, let's say, low entry issues. Most of the times it's a dog changes. So it learns people how the process work on the Angular repo to open a PR, having a change, having the right commit message, being ready, having green CI and everything, signing the CLA. And when you do this first change, you know, oh, actually it could be easy, so you can start with other change. So let's say if we want to start, have a look at the issues, look for low entry with the label good first issue or help wanted, for example. And I know in my case, at the beginning, it's mostly I took those issues, so there was less left. And now that I'm, let's say, a higher level in what I'm able to contribute, I leave them to new people. I tag them explicitly, and some of the time I share them on Twitter. Say, hey, there is this easy issue for you. If you wanna make the change, I will provide some help you make the final changes to land your first PR.
So this is like open question for everyone. Most of the people I speak to, they are like struggling with like how to find the good first issue. Like, of course, the good first issue is very wide, right? I mean, it can be good first issue for someone who knows Angular, but not for someone who doesn't know Angular. So a lot of people actually struggle here, right? So how to find the good first issue for them? And the second issue, mostly they are like they're scared. So they're scared like what happens in case I raise a PR and it's not what team wants, or it's a bad code basically. So yeah.
If I could answer on this, I've never seen the team being angry at a bad PR, let's say. They want to welcome outside contributions. So if the people who open PR are willing to land their PR, so make the changes that are required, because we've got some guidelines, for example, on commit messages. So if people are willing, we are glad to help them land their first change. But of course, they need to follow some rules. And in sometimes, even myself got some PRs denied because it's explicitly not what the teams want. Because, for example, I remember it was over a year back, I wanted to introduce, the track by function we have on the ng4. I say it's quite easy to just land, say, hey, you can pass a string. It's quite easy. But it has so much implication that my PR got denied in few hours after. And there was an explanation by the team member who closed my PR. There was the reasoning, no, we don't want it because there are reasons we didn't even do it ourselves. So sometimes you've got to accept that PRs are denied, but for what the team could say obvious reason for them, but that's still not obvious for the contributors. But most of the time, if it's a good change, the team will help you land it. And I would add that there is one kind of change that looks easy to land, but is really difficult to actually land. It's breaking changes. And for example, changing a type from any to whatever is a major breaking change, and it will require what we call a migration schematic. Writing schematic is not easy. Doing the migration takes a lot of time also for the Angular team. So whenever someone in the Angular repo breaks something, they have to provide what we call a migration. And those migration needs to be run. So on every project, that's what every developers do when they do ng updates. But when the team merges something, they have to also bring the migration on the Google mono repo. So Google is working on a mono repo. So every app on there uses the same version of Angular, for example. And if you break something, then you have to provide also the migration index. And this takes time. And most of the time, the change doesn't land directly. First, because major changes are only landed, breaking changes are only landed in major versions. And the second thing is that someone needs to land the change. Is it worth the time migrating the whole code base? And sometimes the answer is it's not the highest priority. So things can be higher in priority. So I've got some PRs that have been waiting for 2 major versions to get merged because it's too minor for the time it takes.
Yeah, I just looked up my first PR that I opened on the Angular repo. It got denied. It was ultimately denied. But there's a great conversation on there from multiple members of the Angular team explaining why they weren't going to accept it. Accept it as in like not merge it, obviously, right? They were like, we can see the value in this, but from our point of view, this, and this. Also, if you reference this PR, some of these things change. So this one's a little bit less relevant now, kind of thing, right? And there's a great little discussion there. And then the first one that I actually ever got fully merged, was I opened it on September 4th and it was approved on October 10th. So sometimes it just takes a while, right? It was over a month before it's actually merged. There's lots of discussion back and forth. I made changes here and there based on feedback. And they were like so helpful the whole time. Every team member that ever commented on the pull request was so nice about everything. And obviously I thanked them at the end of it and was like, thank you for, working with me on this while I figured out exactly what you guys are looking for and all that kind of stuff. Right. So they're very accepting. Don't ever, to our listeners, don't ever be afraid to open a pull request against the Angular repo or a bug report or an issue kind of thing.
And if ever you get denied, you learn something on your change wasn't considered, wasn't accepted. There could be several reasons, technicals. It could be in terms of feature that they think that it belongs in a library more than the framework itself, etc. Like you said, very helpful most of the times. And don't be scared. You always learn something, either by landing something or by getting denied and understanding some things that you didn't understand beforehand, probably.
Yep, exactly.
So what was your change that was landed, Jay?
The first change that was landed was adding the link preload tags for when the ng optimized image was first released. In SSR, whenever an image is part of the first contentful paint, it'll actually add a preload tag in the head, so that when your index.html SSR is sent to the browser knows that image is going to be loaded once the app actually bootstraps. So, because that was one of the there's a warning there where it's like, hey, by the way, like, you're referencing this image, but you don't have like a pre-connect tag for your domain. So I was like, oh, we could probably do the same thing, but actually do like preload tags so that the browser can kick off the image loading while the application's bootstrapping kind of thing, right? So that was the first one.
Perfect. Yeah. I think every one of you is a contributor, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. What do you remember your first PR, everybody?
First accepted PR.
Yeah, first accepted.
Yeah.
I personally don't. I would have to look it up again.
I'm gonna look it up right now. So yeah.
Lars, you want to say something?
Yeah, I contributed to the form builder API. There was an API that was missing that was only in the non-form builder API, and it was an option for the form builder. Don't remember exactly what it was. This was many years ago, but it was actually accepted. I was using the framework, and I was wondering why can I not do this with form builder when I can do it with new form group and so on. And then I thought, okay, this must be, I don't know, why was this not added? Let me try to add it. And then I had to, I would say that the most difficult things were learning the tool chain because it does not follow the community. It follows Google's tool chain. But I just saw that today we were having an easier time as external contributors, since there's now a dev container image, meaning you can open, for example, using VS Code, you can open up the Angular repo in a container with all the recommended extensions and an environment that just works. For example, it loads the CLang or Clang formatter. It has the TSLint extension that I wouldn't have installed anymore otherwise. It works on Windows, which it didn't really back then. So I would say you would have a greater time today as a contributor than back then. And I felt very proud that this small thing was merged, even though today it's probably not even in the code anymore. It's been replaced by other new API. The form API has changed many times, right? But I will say the latest contribution is also something I was very proud of, and that was in collaboration with you, Matthieu. I have been maintaining a gist on GitHub for 5 years for my own
Everybody know your gist. I think it's very famous on Stack Overflow, for example.
The compatibility matrix for Angular and must-have dependencies, right? And now it's finally part of the official Angular documentation, Angular.io, angular.dev, and I even contributed a few more updates since then. So very proud of that as well, and happy that everyone gets to benefit. And whenever people ask me to update the gist, I say, well, it's in the Angular documentation now, and sometimes I help maintain it there.
So awesome in terms of contribution, because I know that I didn't even know you. I just know that that's the guy I was looking for in Stack Overflow for his table, because I so often, I don't know about you guys, but so often I went back to this table. So, oh, I need to get back to this version of Angular. Which version of Node do I need, etc.
Super helpful.
That was actually hard. I mean, it's not that many lines of Markdown, but it was hard to get merged.
Yes.
There was a lot of discussion on why would this be
Just
beneficial.
the form, how it was, and how we can organize, and also that it doesn't make that there wasn't also no false information on this. But the final result, I love it, and happy to update it every minor or major release.
It became better, and now it's available for everyone to enjoy, and we determined that it was helpful to a lot of developers. For nothing else, for historical reference, because a lot of us open up all the repos. Maybe you want to bring an old Angular library back to life, and then you have to figure out which version of Node.js we were using back then. They might not have a development container. It might not even exist back then. They might not have a Node version file or anything like that. So that's when you have to figure all these things out. And it didn't take a long time digging through all the package JSON files of all these packages before I started maintaining a spreadsheet of this for my own sake. And then I put it into Gist and kept updating it because I kept needing information for new versions, right? And people, it was very popular even on GitHub. It got stars and forks and so on. And I think I had more than 100 commits just to that one gist. So
nice.
I was very happy to get that merged.
This is also a great example of community contributions. Someone providing some info outside of it, and also having the idea to open the PR, to integrate it into the docs, taking the time. It took, like you said, a lot of time to land it, but the result is really great. So we have now a single source of information. So what version do you need for whatever version of Angular you're running? So thanks for this.
Yeah, that was awesome. I looked up Sanu's classic first contribution. It's a documentation update. Yeah, he added 3 missing backticks to an MD file.
Yeah, that's actually
formatted.
And you sent us what's your PR?
Yes, actually, it's very funny that this, because when you debug code in Chrome Developer Tools and you don't have those backticks in place, Chrome Developer Tools at that time was breaking and it couldn't highlight, the code properly, and you couldn't debug it even properly. So I figured it out by pure, luck, that you have to add these ticks, and then suddenly starts to work.
Yeah, love it.
Really interesting story about the gist which Lars had. So I think there was someone who was asking about like the version, this thing, and on Slack, and he shared like the gist, and I ended up saying, "Hey, that this is my co-founder of This Is Learning. We are friends, of course." Like I wanted to just go off, but yeah, I did that. And about my first PR, I think it was really exactly 5 years ago. It was Angular documentation around the libraries. So I think that was time Angular library landed like 2 versions before, and it was not documented basically. So I ended up doing that, and yeah, that's how I started. It's been 5 years.
Crazy. Documentation updates are always good, right? Like if you're a beginner or someone new to the framework, either that be contributing or using or what, and you ask yourself, I'm not quite sure how this works, or where do I find this information? That signals that there might be an improvement that could be made to the documentation, right? Because you're not the only person thinking that. I promise you that you are not the only person thinking that, right? So if you're a beginner, I always think about that when I work with a new library or a new project or whatever. It's like, if I'm wondering this after reading the documentation isn't clear enough. It's not a you problem, it's a documentation problem. Right.
Exactly. And also, since the team spent a lot of time rewriting the new docs, it's probably not perfect. So recently, we've closed all the issues we had on the old docs because it's considered in maintenance mode. So we won't be doing any improvements on it. Besides, probably the last thing that gets added is the new output that will be released probably on Wednesday in the final 17.3. But so every contribution against the new Angular.dev docs, either tutorials or the playground or the docs or the references, everything you see that could be seen as an improvement, either open an issue on it or just drop a PR to improve a markdown document, and let's go. That could be your first contribution.
Thanks.
Yeah, highly recommended. Documentation contributions.
Great. So of course we know about, like, of course, contributing to open source can change your life, right? I mean, most of us have been there. But what's your take, Matthew? Like, why someone should contribute to an open source project? Let it be anything, right? I mean, not specific to Angular, but yeah, any project.
I'd say why. I see two major points to contribute. When you contribute, you go down somehow into how the library or the framework works. So you become not only an expert on how I'd say how the API is, what works and what not. You get the insight on how things work. And by doing this, for example, I started, I downloaded the repo. I did a fork on my computer the first time because I wanted to understand more about change detection. How does it work? How does unpush work? Why in some time it gets updated? Why not? Etc. I wanted to understand, and there are some articles on the web, but sometimes they're not up to date. Sometimes they're not even true, and the single source of truth that really exists is the code base. So by contributing, you need somehow to know how things work. It helps you develop your expertise. So on either here for Angular, the framework, but whatever open source library, by contributing to a library, you will improve your expertise on it. So this is the first part. And the second point is contributing to a major framework like Angular helps you develop let's say the skills around writing software. For example, I never did really let's say I never did groom my commit tree as much as when I'm doing it for Angular. By grooming, I mean amending all the commits that the change I want to land is a single commit. Doing correct Git messages, being able to do, for example, know how the interactive rebase work, being able to do a fix up, really helpful when you're doing contribution, got a lot of feedbacks, helps people understand the changes you're doing, so they see the delta, not only amending the single commit, but by doing the fix up, they see what your changes exactly, etc., etc. So it will also see how other tooling that all exist. I couldn't even consider that Google was using a tool that's the open source tool is called Bazel, and how complex it is, but how powerful. And it's really all the skills around software development that contributing to a project will enlarge, let's say, your knowledge on how things can work and how you could maybe use it in other projects, I'd say.
Yep.
Yeah, I 100% agree. This is giving me flashbacks to 5 years ago when RX Angular template was born, just from reading the source code of Angular and debugging at runtime and so on, trying to figure out how things work and how we could optimize that. And that ended up in local change detection, which is the most optimal way you can have an Angular application, and zoneless applications as well. And yeah, I'm happy that I'm able to navigate the Angular code base. I do that a lot. Also Angular material in my day-to-day work writing Angular applications. I did the same for NGRX. I built a sort of a companion library called Router Component Store, where it's NGRX component store, but for router state. And to do that, I had to look very much into the NGRX source code and also the Angular router code and so on. So you really get to be an expert in parts of the code base, and that helps you build other things and understand it better?
Yeah. Even my first PR for NGRX was because of I was reading Angular documentation and Angular code base related to schematics. I was really like that was the time I was exploring schematics and has just landed up on a issue in NGRX code base, and I was like, oh, I know this. And then just like it was just replacing a new function. That's it. So it helped. It really helps, like to. And then of course I love writing schematics still. That's what I do at my job. I just like to try to grab some extra time and try writing a new schematics. And I think NX makes it even more fun, I would say, because of the utilities they have. I mean, of course, Angular team, yeah, they don't want to expose everything, but NX has done a great job, like writing those utilities so you can enjoy writing schematics and even writing tests for them.
Mm-hmm. And the Angular code base is just an awesome code base to read, right? Like if you want to learn how to build software, right? Like regardless of what your opinion on Angular as a framework is, like the code base itself is like it's really good, right? Like it's a great piece of software.
It's not perfect, but it gets better.
Yeah.
Just to give an example, the team just landed what is almost a 1 year work for a single developer. They rewrote the whole template compiler.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, the entry point was a single file of over 3,000 lines. And I can't believe that you could consider it a really good example to show to people. But the code base is not perfect, but it's improving over time. And like you said, mostly it's great to see how good let's say coding rules are in place in such a huge code base. And having because the Angular code base is now almost 10 years old, and it's not that messy. It's actually, like you said, quite good.
Yeah. And no software is perfect. So like that's an impossible standard to hold any kind of software to, right? Like it's never going to be perfect. And even if you got to perfection one day, it would be imperfect the following day. So it's imperfect, but it's still good, right? And yeah, so.
I agree with all of that. Just want to say, when I started with contributing, I wasn't aware about so many things, like interactive rebase and fix up. I had no idea about fix up, right?
Yeah.
So once I saw that, and once, like you guys said, like Angular helps you really to learn these things, I kind of found that it organically empowered me to become better, right? I wanted to become better because that's what Google is using. And we know Google is doing, the best it can, right? So it was really great. I was able to learn all of those things and then share it with my colleagues at work or with meetups, right? So these are things you don't learn or you don't see anywhere else, right?
Yeah, and somehow working with people with, let's say, I consider them having higher skills. Even if I have 10 years experience, I sometimes feel like a newbie working with them. There's so much things to learn. And like you said, it gets the better out of you. You learn something you want to learn, you want to do better. And by showing how you can do better, it will make you a better developer, a better software engineer. And this is something, like you said, you can share with your colleagues, with your friends, and also at local meetups.
Yeah. One more thing. I remember when I I had a few PRs and I would always get feedback, always get a comment, let's change this, let's change that, this is cool, we can do this better. Like after like 10, 15 PRs, my first PR got approved without any comments, right? And I was so proud of myself, right? Because this is a great feeling, Somebody from the Angular team looks at your code and says, okay, this is good enough for us, right?
And I'd say it's more than good enough, because good enough is sometimes not enough, because I really have the feeling that every single bit that can be improved, it's not blocking for the PR, then giving you the nits, the small nits, and you say, yeah, I could do it better. So you want to make the change. So even if it's not blocking, you're doing the change. So at the end, your change is that maybe let's not say perfect, but almost perfect.
Yeah, I actually had a list of things they would put underneath, right?
Mhm.
So I would always go through that list
Nice.
before I create my PR and make sure that I cover everything.
For example, that could be the kind of thing that's worth sharing, let's say, even outside of the team, because it could help anybody. So what do you need to check really on the PR to be really at, say, a high level of expectations?
Mhm.
What makes a good PR great?
Like what are the frequently knitted things, right?
Yeah.
For example, it could be interesting to just have a look and say like you said, what's mostly knitted, what you should be looking at when you're doing your change. Could be probably an interesting talk to have.
Yeah, I agree.
Or just a topic for your next blog post.
go.
Maybe. Yeah, it could be interesting. You're right.
Yeah. So this brings us to another question, because Sonu said he has some questions. So Sonu, would you like to ask your questions before we wrap up things?
Yeah, I think most of them were already answered, but just maybe one last question. So for developers looking to contribute, what advice would you give them now you have been contributing for over 1 year?
Sorry, can you repeat? I didn't get everything.
What advice would you give new people that want to contribute to Angular?
What advice? Just be curious. I think the hardest thing is to find what to change, because the code base is, I'd say, quite actually watched by a lot of people, also by the team. So it can be hard to find things. Just wander in the code base, look at it, learn from it, and maybe you will see a small typo in a comment, maybe a small optimization, everything. That's how it started with me. I was just curious at looking at the code base, and with my knowledge, like I said, my change was just a small selector on the directive. I was able to say, oh, I could improve that. I improved it, and it landed. So by being curious, you will open doors. That would be my best advice.
Great, thank you.
So we are almost in 1 hour. So we generally ask our guests to promote something. So if you want to promote something on the channel,
I don't have to promote myself. Let's say I don't have something to promote. I'm just having fun by what I'm doing. I would just advise people to do the same, let's say.
What about your talk at NGConf next week? Do you want to promote your talk at NGConf next week?
My topic in NGConf is actually contributing to Angular. So
look at that.
Same topic, a few fun slides, where share some insights, some information. I hope it will give the kick for some people to also start contributing, because the team is looking for, let's say, is accepting outside contributions. Everything's worth what is worth merging.
I'm excited. I'll see you there.
all the best for your talk.
I'll be there.
Thursday in the morning, I think.
There you go.
So enjoy NGConf, both of you. So are you planning to attend NGConf? No. Class?
Sorry?
Did we?
I'm not allowed in America.
You're not allowed in America?
Sorry. What are you planning to attend? Yeah, you have been to NGConf before, any of you?
I have, yes. Yeah, I've been twice, so 2 in person and then 1 virtual.
Okay.
Yeah.
And somehow I need to thank Santosh for actually joining conferences, because when I met him for the first time, it was June 2023. He was just suggesting me you should maybe go to NG Poland. That's first conference I ever assisted, wherever, technical conference. And this is where I first met in person some of the team. So Pavel Kozlowski and Alex Rickenbaugh from the team, and Simona. So that's how it started. Say, yeah, maybe I should attend other conferences, and I tried to join others, and NGConf was one of the biggest, and I was so lucky to be able to join that.
It's gonna be fun.
So thank you, Santosh, for just giving me the idea that maybe I should just attend some conferences.
We're all here because of Santosh in some way or another.
Yeah. And the funniest thing is, he just wrote me a message on Twitter because he was seeing that I was having a rail trip across Europe, and he was saying to me, just if you're in Hamburg, just shout, give me a sign so we can have a drink together. And that's what happened. I just planned to be in Hamburg one day. I even gave him the wrong day. That's what happened. I sent him a message like 2 or 3 hours before. Yeah, my train is late. He was saying, shouldn't we meet tomorrow? I said, oh fuck, I fucked everything. But we were still able to meet in Hamburg. So somehow you change a bit of my life, Santosh.
You already changed your life by contributing to Angular. So
yeah, perfect.
We have to have a drink next week then, Matt, you and I in Salt Lake.
Perfect. I'm happy to.
I'm sure we'll have more than one, but yes.
Perfect. I'll be happy to meet everybody from across the pond.
Yeah.
Good. So thanks again, Matthieu, and thanks everyone for joining us. And we will be back next week, on the next episode. And that episode is really interesting. Are you scared about AI taking over your job? So of course you should join. So we will have Chris, who will talk about like how AI is going to impact your job, and interesting topic. So for sure. So thanks again of everyone, and we'll see you next week. And shout out to our listeners, because we just reached 600 subscribers. That's a big number. We also reached 500, more than 500 views to the last 2 episodes. That's again a big win for us. So keep supporting us, and yeah, see you next time. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.